All right. How's it going, everyone? My name is Matt Firman, and I am a Baltimore-based indie filmmaker and screenwriter, as well as a co-founder of Story Prism. You know, a lot of people have this misconception about screenwriting. They think we're all mingling around with celebrities in Hollywood, knocking it out of the park with our first draft at 3 a.m., but that couldn't be further from the truth. So tonight, I want to take a moment to dispel this rose-colored myth and get at the heart of what it actually means to be a screenwriter. What harrowing tales can we learn about all the things that these people have done on film sets, and what lessons can be learned from that? So I want to take a moment and introduce our panelists tonight. So first up, we have Lindsey Paulette. Go ahead and raise your hand. There we go. She is a Richmond, Virginia native, is a writer, director, and visual artist who began her career in entertainment as a child stage actor and has been passionate about storytelling ever since. She studied filmmaking at Brightpoint Community College, the Savannah College of Art and Design, and Virginia Commonwealth University, where she earned her BA in cinema. A month after graduating from VCU, she started production on her first feature film, The Trip. She wrote, directed, and co-produced the film, which was shot 20 days and premiered theatrically in February of 2024. Lindsey is an experienced storyteller with 13 films directed, written, 2 published, 1 act plays, 2 novels, and 3 children's books. So quite a lot. Next up is Julia Haberstick. Julie, so sorry. I'm coming at this blind. She is a writer-director who has worked on several hit shows and movies, including Homeland, Chicago Fire, Bones, and Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. She's also worked on various commercials and independent productions throughout her career and is the founder of creative service Citric Focus Consulting, where she runs the streaming platform Mason Arts Amplified for George Mason University. Her first book, Coyote Gratitude, was published in 2022, and she is currently in development for her feature directorial debut, Pinned. All right. And then we have Christopher Cunetto. He is a queer Italian-American writer, director, and producer based in Washington, D.C. A lifelong commitment to the arts brought him from his rural and small-town central Missouri roots to the East Coast, an experience that continues to influence his work. His films have screened at diverse venues from the Kennedy Center to multiple Oscar and CSA qualifying festivals, including his recent short film, Safe Word, which has garnered international praise and received numerous awards. Christopher holds a BFA in painting and drawing from the Corcoran School of Art and an MA in writing and directing from American University. Cunetto's work focuses on stories and perspectives from queer people and older adults and believes that film is a tool for empathy and understanding. He is currently working on his feature film debut, Crystalline. Okay, so let's just go ahead and dive into this. So I want to ask each of you about the impetus for getting into screenwriting. This is a seemingly impossible and lofty job to get into. So I just want to know, like, what was the moment that made you guys say, yes, this is exactly what I want to do with my life? And what keeps you going despite the adversities? I guess we'll start with Chris.
Oh, for me, it's really, this is an uncomfortable answer to say aloud, but wanting the most control possible over the material I direct, and just having things that I want to say. And so, in order to really express what I want to as an artist in the most direct way, I've got to write that too. And then, of course, the technical, craft of telling story is a really interesting thing to do and a really spicy thing for my brain to engage with. And so when I do it for clients, when I do it for myself, it's just something my brain enjoys. And that's really it.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's a pretty apt point you made there about controlling, right? I mean, there are so many things that we really can't control in this world, but if there's one thing that everybody can control, it's what is on page. And yeah, I have to agree, that's probably my favorite thing too. Julie, what about you?
So I more got drawn to the industry as a whole, and screenwriting is just a piece of that. So for me, I was very young when I realized that filmmaking really is the combination of all the things that I love, including community, theater, writing, photography, art history. All of these things come together, and you get a group of people working towards a common goal, which is story, which is designed to make us see each other and see ourselves. And out of that, I've always been a writer, and screenwriting is, you can't have a movie without screenwriting. And so it's just always kind of been a necessity.
That's so true. And, that's something that we often see in the indie film community where the screenplay is often skipped out on just because, I mean, I don't know. I personally have met a lot of people who are just so hell-bent on making the film because it's so enjoyable to do that. Nobody wants to spend 2-3 years polishing up a script, but, that's the foundation of everything. Without that, you don't have any kind of stickiness to your product or the content that you're making. Lindsey, what about you?
I'm very similar to you, Julie. I don't think I ever made the conscious decision that I wanted to be a screenwriter. I was always telling stories as a kid. I was a theater kid first, and my school didn't have a theater program, so I would do a bunch of auditions. And when I say my high school had a theater program, I was like in 3rd grade when I started acting. And so all of my stuff was outside of school. And I would beg my teachers to let me write my little scripts and like direct my classmates. And so that was my introduction to it. And I loved theater for a long time, but I always felt like something was missing. And then I started doing film. And I was like, oh, okay, this is the platform I was supposed to be writing in. Because I love, I'm a dialogue girl through and through. Like I love a good dialogue scene, and that's what theater relies on so heavily. But I like that film has that visual element to it as well. And when I opened myself up to screenwriting, I was able to also incorporate that visual element and give certain elements that you can't have in theater. And then I knew I wanted to go to film school. I didn't want to pursue theater after high school. And so my freshman year of film school was kind of the beginning of, okay, we're committing to this.
Yeah. Did everyone here do theater, just out of curiosity? Because I feel like, okay, yeah, everybody, me too, actually. I didn't do theater, I did tech theater, just because I couldn't act. But yeah, so I guess, okay, so we know like what the impetus was for getting started, but what was the first practical step that you guys took in getting started? What was like, I guess, I guess what was that practical moment and how practical was it? Let's start from the other end. Julie.
Well,
No, I meant Julie.
Do you want to start in the middle?
Julie.
All right, we'll start in the middle.
Yeah, we're going to do...
I want to further understand your question. Do you mean like...
So, yeah, I mean, I guess, okay, so you decided you wanted to be a screenwriter, right? Or filmmaker. And
sure.
So what was that first initial step like? So as an example, for me personally, this was probably around 2012. I got a degree in teaching and history, and I didn't want to do any of that. I barely survived the internship, and I was pretty much dealing with a huge bout of depression, trying to figure out what am I going to do with my life? And that's when, my brother was like, hey, we should get back into doing the thing that we did when we were kids, which is make films. And so I was like, oh, that's cool, but who's going to write it? And since I didn't really have any experience with film, I thought, all right, I guess I'll start writing it. So for me, my first practical step was literally just opening up a Word document and writing a story idea that I had, only for it to blow up in my face probably about 20 or 30 times just before I got it right. So yeah, something like that.
Gotcha. Now I understand. My apologies. So I had been kind of doing small video projects and whatnot since middle school, and by high school I really knew that I wanted to get into the industry overall. And I actually started, we didn't have any kind of video or filmmaking kind of groups in my high school at the time. And so I started an independent study and made my first short film. So I was, 17 and just making my own first short to submit to colleges and whatnot. And that was my first kind of side creatively. And then in the industry itself, funny enough, Joe Carabeo, who runs this festival, we met on the very first shoot that I ever worked on. And I was 19 years old, and my theater teacher actually said, "Hey, there's a shoot nearby, and they're looking for production assistants. Do you want to jump in?" And I remember like the day of the call, like I was like, you know what? I'd rather sleep in, maybe. And I just went, you know what? You can always sleep in. Here's an experience that you're never going to have again. Let's give it a go. And I went, and that was the beginning of my film career. So that's my first creative entree, and then my first professional entree.
Nice. Lindsey, what about you?
Mine was also rooted in theater, so I didn't get to do my first film until after I'd finished a year of film school, because it was a lot of the class picking the films and then we shoot those. So the summer after that is when I finally did my own project. But I would say for me, it started my senior year of high school. My theater department did this thing called the student-directed one-acts, and I knew I wanted to direct one of the one-acts. I also knew that I didn't want to direct somebody else's script. So I had a script that I'd written my freshman year when I realized that was a thing. And I was like, I'm going to direct this my senior year. And then we got there, and for the first year ever, they had themes. So now my script does not work anymore. And so I had 3 weeks to write a new one act and then pitch that if I wanted to direct it. And that's what I did. It's definitely not my best work. I was 17. But it is the first thing that I ever got published. And after that happened, I was like, oh, I really like how this feels. I really like directing my own writing, and I really like the affirmation and confirmation that other people like it too. And that was via the publication. And I knew I wanted to pursue that again. And then I just kind of chased that from theater into film as I transitioned out of high school into a freshman in college.
Yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, we don't want to admit this, but I think a huge motivator for at least me and many others is recognition, right? I mean, you're not really going to be making a huge amount of money in this for the most part. So, yeah, I mean, what else is there but just getting recognition for externalizing something that is intrinsic to you, something that would otherwise go unnoticed and not seen. You're putting forth that effort with a bunch of people to make magic happen. So it's a beautiful thing. What about you, Christopher?
Similar experiences very early. I made my first short film at 13. My sister's in the audience. She and I would make a lot of silly stuff together. We made Little Orange Riding Hood, which was obviously a spoof of Little Red Riding Hood. She was the titular character. So, just having an interest in it from a very early age, but kind of a winding path to where I am now, and actually, a lot of the kind of like practical, like craft-based story writing experience I took on during I'm a corporate creative by day, right? And so I run creative for Salesforce's Impact organization. We do a lot of like environmental filmmaking and kind of corporate style storytelling. And so my way into fiction screenwriting came through, me coming up through the corporate creative industries and taking on more and more, kind of corporate writing, and then just kind of like falling more and more in love with the craft of storytelling in general. So I think like all of us, it's something that has been with us for a long while, and then figuring out kind of the truest ways to express what we're trying to get at.
Nice. And that was all started in Missouri, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What was the film scene like over there? Probably shouldn't have asked that question. Oh, okay. Well, so with that, So one thing, at least that I personally have experienced, is that silent doubt that you get from friends and family all around you. Because again, this is a very lofty job. Like that's like saying, "Oh, I want to be a rap star," right? It's okay. Is that something that you all have experienced? And if so, how did you handle that? Yeah, I guess let's start with Lindsey.
I have very supportive parents, and I'm lucky for that. They're not creative people, so I really lucked out with that, not having people from a creative background, but they still understand creative enough that they encouraged it. My grandparents still have no idea what I do. And they were doubtful when I wanted to go to film school, but I do work in the commercial world as well, and that is where I make my money. And when I say that, oh, I worked on this commercial, they understand that. They understand, oh, that's cool. So you made some money. And so that's important to them. So they let everything else slide. They let all the other creative stuff slide because at the end of the day, I still have a real job.
No, yeah. My brother and I's first successful film actually just got the worst reviews from our parents. Like they actually thought we were a little crazy. So yeah, Julie, what about you?
So I also am very lucky to have a very supportive network, and I think maybe there's just a bit of blind pursuit. I'm sure there are naysayers that have come into my ether, and I'm just like, well, I'm making my story, like, so, and just toddling forward and kind of pursuing things. I will say the doubt that I have to deal with most often actually comes from myself. And that is a lot harder to manage because it's very difficult to get away from oneself. And that I think is more ongoing. That is more of a, I've gotten to a point where it's like, okay, I know that that's going to happen. I know that I'm going to have a moment where I go like, you know what, this scene works or this whole movie works. I'm like, yes, like I'm getting it. And 2 days later, I'm going to go, what was I even thinking? Like, this is absolute garbage. We just did a public table read for the feature that I'm developing. And throughout the process, literally weekly, I would go between like, okay, like I think we've got a great community here. This is a super solid piece. I'm so glad we're doing this. To like, I'm gonna have to cancel. I'm gonna have to cancel the piece. So I think the mission is always to to find the people that you do really respect and that can tell you when you are really going off the rails. Versus, as a creative person, you're always in a vulnerable act. You are doing an act of creation and putting that out for others' consumption. And that's always going to feel a little uncomfortable, and you're always going to have some hesitation. And I think when you don't have that hesitation, that's when you're probably in the worst spot than you really think.
Yeah, self-doubt can be a huge killer, but concurrently at the same time, being your number one critic is also extraordinarily helpful because you're going to be your biggest cheerleader. Especially that first draft that you do, you're going to be like, oh man, this is the best thing and nobody can tell me wrong. And all your friends and family and the people who are helping out, they really want to work on that film. So it's not uncommon to get a whole bunch of white lies that puts you into that illusion. And it's really up to you to really break past that and to really evaluate your story for what it really is and what that random audience is going to think about it. Christopher, what about you?
Yeah, similar experience, having really great friends and family who just like support what I want to do. But from like a life math perspective, just kind of always being able to like say, it doesn't really matter because I pay my own bills and you can't really tell me my business. And I think that I've actually experienced more misunderstanding and doubt from acquaintances or like when I start talking with people about what it's like to make films and have a job and all this stuff, because I think there's not a lot of understanding of like what actually goes into having this type of career and pursuing this kind of stuff. So I think I experienced more discomfort just kind of trying to connect with people and try to get them to understand what it's like. But the biggest naysayer being in your own head is very, very real. And writing as a craft in particular is this psychotic experience that you've all said, which is like you write the thing, you're like, this is the best fucking thing I've ever wrote in my life. And you get up the next morning and you're like, was I on literal drugs? What is this? But, then being able to recognize, okay, here's the core of what I was loving about that scene 2 days ago, and how do I actually make that with the craft? How do I articulate that in a way that is actually good? And so sometimes I wish I had some naggy aunt that would just be like, when am I gonna get a real job? Instead of like the nag in my head who's like, you're not good at this.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Well, yeah, I mean, speaking of first draft, I mean, that's a huge wake-up call when it suddenly dawns on you that you don't have a piece of gold that you're working with. So I guess with that, think back to that first piece of negative feedback you got. Yeah, I mean, it's extremely crushing. So I guess, like, how were you able to handle that negative feedback and move forward and take that as a strength to be able to improve your script?
Can I take that?
Yeah, sure.
So, because this is one of my favorite stories. So I've been working on this piece for 14 years. Because every time I finished a draft, I would go like, this doesn't feel quite right. And finally I realized I had to grow as a person to tell it. And now thankfully we're moving to the next stage. But I started it as a college student. And one of our assignments was we had to just pitch the whole piece to our class. And I sat there and I fumbled through my outline and kind of this sad little pitch. And it was so nervous, but I was the first person that went in my class. And I finished. And this one guy raised his hand. He was the very first person to give feedback and said, "Why would anybody go see that shitty movie?" In the middle of all of the students. And I'm sitting in front of everybody. And I was like, I will not cry in this moment. And I realized, like, okay, how do I, because I will say that's not feedback. That's someone kind of wanting to kind of get a rise out of the situation and, kind of throw their opinion out there. That's one thing. Feedback is when someone understands what you're trying to do and wants to get you there in a better way. So, but I took that moment of like, okay, how can I get what I actually need out of this person, which is that kind of feedback? And I said, you know what? I appreciate that. And what would you suggest that would make this something that wouldn't make it a movie as you would describe it, as you just described it? And he fumbled for his words, but he finally did find some actual critique that was useful to me in that moment. And I want to add, one of the most beautiful things about feedback, even when it is really brutal, is it is your prerogative as the arbiter of your story, as the writer, as the author, to take whatever feedback is given to you. A feedback is just an offering. And you get the opportunity to either accept that feedback. Sometimes it is super important, and sometimes it is not. So even when I've gotten a bunch of blunt feedback since then as well, but even in those moments, I recognize, okay, how can I find the root of what's happening here? Is that something that I think is important to make my story better? If so, great. And if not, okay, I will thank that person for their time and send this piece of feedback far away from me.
Well, consider yourself lucky, because when you're hanging out with a whole bunch of white liars who really care about your well-being, you may not get that feedback that you're actually looking for. I mean, it's not something to blame. I mean, we all do it, right? But yeah, I mean, that is an extremely hard thing to do. I mean, giving feedback, honestly, because, sometimes you'll get a script and you're like, it's hard to evaluate this because it's just not working really that well. So, Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head pretty well about that. Just this idea of making sure that when you are giving feedback, you're actually giving real constructive feedback instead of just simply saying, oh, well, this didn't work or that didn't work. But, at the same time, everybody is an audience member. So even if somebody says, oh, well, this scene didn't work, I didn't really like it, maybe it's not, they're being negative about it. They're just saying it didn't work and I don't know why it doesn't work. That's still good feedback, honestly. It's not the best feedback, but it's still good because it allows you to hone in on that one scene to say, okay, what is this person seeing that I am not seeing? And it might not be anything at all. It could just be a preference, So, yeah, Lindsey, what about you?
I don't think I've ever gotten a piece of feedback that like absolutely destroyed my emotions because I, like everybody up here, am my own worst villain. So nothing you say to me is going to hurt my feelings more than the things that I've already thought about my script. I do get a lot of feedback that doesn't make any sense sometimes. And so you have to evaluate that and be like, okay, what the hell are they talking about? But then also, even if that's not helpful, you can use it because clearly something needs to be clarified. If they are going in a completely different direction than I was, even if the feedback itself makes no sense, I know that I need to go back through and ask myself some questions to see if we're having a miscommunication or if I'm wrong or if they just didn't read it like when they were fully conscious. But yeah, no, I mean, I actually love when I get critical feedback because I don't feel like it happens very often. You get a lot of, I liked this. This was good. Put a comma here. Didn't ask for a copy edit. I asked for content check, but it's fine. So when I get critical feedback, if it's constructive, like you said, no one's ever told me that. Why would anyone see this shitty movie?
I am friends with that person now, by the way. Just to say.
But yeah, so I'm like, thank you so much for giving me a real note. But I'm also, I used to be an actor, so we love notes.
Yeah, deep down inside, I feel like all screenwriters are secretly masochists at heart, right? We just love self-torture. Want to chime in on that, Christopher?
Well, I hate notes and I hate being told what to do. So, but my whole career I've worked for and with clients, and so I am very good at dealing with notes in all kinds of different creative deliverables. The worst note I got was not on a screenplay. It was on some design work that I was doing, and the client sent me back a drawing of a single stick figure on a yellow Post-it note and said, "What if it was more like this?" And it was a print design. It was a book. And I was like, okay. So things like that happen in many industries. The worst, and this isn't like worse because it ruined my emotions, but it was the worst piece of screenwriting feedback I got was from a mentor of mine. And she told me about a certain element of a screenplay. She's like, I don't think this is doing what you think it's doing. And why it was so challenging to me is because, for two reasons. A, it forced me to think about, okay, am I at the limit of my technical skill, my craft abilities here, right? And that's a hard thing to face. And then B, it is, or does this person just not resonate with the thing that I might actually be doing okay? And it can be really confusing to get notes, whether they, are buttering your bread or not, because you have to figure out what to do with them. Yeah. And you mentioned the role of the audience, right? Everyone is an audience, and the hardest task, but the most essential one, is figuring out, like, what is the note under the note? Because, like, audiences will often find the thing that bumps correctly, but they will not deliver the diagnosis correctly. Like, only you know your story and the web well enough to figure out the fix for the bump. And the bump, I think, can be clocked by a layperson, but the fix, like, rarely are you able to get that from outside. It has to be from the architect of the story.
What about the best piece of advice you've ever gotten? Anyone can chime in. Well, I can start. The best piece of advice I ever got was actually super simple. It's show, don't tell. a good friend of mine who's been doing screenwriting for a very, very long time pointed this out very early on when I started because I guess I got started writing them almost like novels. And, you know, I mean, with film, it's very much so, you know, it's visual. So staying on the visuals and understanding that you can convey subtext as well as so much more information beyond the dialogue and even beyond the action too. You can do it with motifs, you can do it with aesthetics, the particular lighting and the mood that you set and everything. Each layer of the filmmaking process like adds that extra dimension so that you don't have to just necessarily rely on dialogue all the time.
Yeah, I think two come to mind, which are don't be boring, right? Whether it's like my corporate work or my, narrative work, I have a job to do, right? And then the other one is write for your reader. Your first audience is the executive, is the producer, it's your collaborators, it's your client. And if your script is boring, then you're not going to grab them. And so, writing for emotional impact is something I think about a lot when I'm screenwriting. You can do a lot with text that feels almost prose-ish in your screenplays that can help you convey the tone of the film that you want to make. And so as a director, I'm always thinking about how can I build how this film feels into the text before we even get to conversations about how we're going to make it or who's going to be in it or what. It's really about using the words to convey the thing that you eventually want to make, no matter what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to just echo off of that because I have to say that was not the way I was taught screenwriting. And I think a lot of screenwriting professors and programs, they teach you the format, they teach you like that screenwriting is a blueprint for a film. You don't need to put any emotion into things. Like there's not like you just need to give like the broad swaths so that someone else can make your movie. And I think most screenwriters start off writing for themselves earlier anyway. So all of us have more flexibility with the written word in general. So what you're talking about in terms of like taking that format and using it to inspire in the reader what you want them to feel and see, that to me, that's what makes a great screenplay. And that's not necessarily the way I think we are all taught to make screenplays. And to that end, I was also taught a lot about structure, which has always been difficult for me, I will say. I've always had difficulty with really fitting into, well, it has to be by this page count that this happens, and then this happens, and and it always bumped against me. It always, whenever I tried to really fit into it, it felt very unnatural. It felt very like I was forcing things to happen when they didn't really want to happen that way. And I went to the Austin Film Festival years ago, and I listened to Craig Mazin talk about his version of structure, which he said, you just need scenes that have a thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So your movie just has to have a character that has a direction. The scene happens to either to change that direction in some way, to like create conflict, change that direction, and then forces you into the next scene. And that is its own structure. So I think we are all kind of given certain very specific tools, the save the cat, all of these things that can be very useful and can be very valid. And also I think the medium is a lot more flexible than that.
Yeah. Especially with camera directions too, right? I mean, I don't know. Like I'm always told, don't put those in. But I feel like if you know when to do it, it can be appropriate, So, you have anything to add on to that?
Mine's more specific to being a screenwriter and a director. And I promise I'm not an astrology person, but I am a Capricorn. So I'm like... And this is things that I was told in college because I didn't know what any of that meant. But then I went to school with a lot of astrology girls, and they're like, "Oh, are you a Capricorn?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "You're very you're a perfectionist, and you need to learn when to let go and move on to the next phase of things, because I will hold on to a script for dear life forever, But because I'm also a filmmaker and I'm a collaborator, there's a lot of things that you can kind of figure out as you bring people into it as well. So the script, I would get a script to a place where you can't mess with it anymore. It is the script. And then I do find that it changes a little bit once I have actors and once I'm talking to a cinematographer and stuff like that. And I think that's a unique situation to specifically being a writer-director, because you get to continue that storytelling and you do get to let go a little bit earlier because you're not handing it to somebody else. It's still yours, and you get that creative control all the way through to the end of it. And if it's going to change, it's going to be because you decided it changed, not because, you half-assed it and said, you know what, I'm done writing this script. Somebody else can have it now.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, we think of screenwriting as a solitary act, but that's just the beginning part, So I guess I want to ask you guys, so the business side is really all about collaboration. So when did you first realize this, and how did you go about cultivating those relationships for opportunities? Chris, you want to start?
I mean, I feel like if you're in the industry or you're a creative, you realize relationships are kind of, you live or die by them. And then the other thing you live or die by is the work that you are able to make. So my approach has always been to make the best stuff that I can and meet as many good people as I can. And, I think along my career, you invite people in to look at your work and give you feedback. You invite their work into your world, and sometimes they buy it, sometimes they don't. But I think that for me, at least, the most, nutritious connections are the ones where there is that give and take, and there's a genuine interest for both people to uplift and make the work better and make the artist better. I think that business relationships are pretty different than that, because everyone has an agenda. So it just gets, I think from there, it gets pretty complicated, and you got to be strategic and you got to be shrewd. And if you're trying to get your thing made, there are ways to do that. But as an artist, the most gratifying relationships are the ones where there's give and take.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how I personally got started. It was the idea of, I guess, reciprocal altruism, right? It's that give-take relationship, especially when you're starting out, because you don't have anything, right? And a lot of times you may not even have the skills of writing a screenplay, but maybe you have a car, you have two hands, you can lift things, right? So whenever I go to any sort of networking event, the one thing that I try to stay away from is talking about myself. I usually like to probe questions and ask the other person what they're doing, what they're working on, specifically so I can look for opportunities to help out on something, especially if it's something really cool. Julie, you want to add something?
Sure. The reason I got into the industry overall, I think, has to do with collaboration. And so for me, that's just kind of always been part and parcel of the process. And I have gotten to a place in my career where I'm not interested in working with people just in the you will always meet people in your career that really are just kind of cutthroat, and they're just trying to get to where they're going. And, you can be a piece of that puzzle, but you don't actually matter. And that's not how I treat people. I think the best work comes out of relationships where everybody has, we don't all need to be buddy, super friends, but you do need to have respect for the people that you're working with, from PAs all the way up to your executive producers. If you don't have that kind of all the way through, then I think the project itself suffers, to be honest. So for me, when I ever go to those kind of networking events and whatnot, I'm really looking for, okay, who feels like a fit to me? Who feels like we could work together in a way that we could build something beautiful together. And there's definitely people that I've met that have bigger credits or are more it would behoove me to, kind of pitch to them a little harder. But I find that even when I have pursued those relationships, they don't always come to fruition. And when they do, it tends to be smaller versus I want to make movies. I want to tell stories with people that I respect.
It's very beautiful. Lindsey, you want to add?
Yeah. Networking was kind of a foreign concept to me for a long time. I didn't really think too much about it. Again, I'm a former theater kid actor, so I kind of was always having a community around me, and I didn't really realize that was networking until I got invited to my first formal networking event. I was so nervous, and I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And then I got there, and I was like, oh, this is what I do all the time. And I already have this community around me, and I'd never been pursuing it because it was always something that just naturally happened. And when you're a kid, it's easy, and you go to theater camp, it's easy. And then you get to film school, and it's easy. And when I first started working professionally, it was a little scary because now you have people that aren't necessarily in your same age group and your demographic, and you're meeting people that know so much more than you. And, I got by the same way that I've always gotten by. When I was a PA, I was nice to everybody. And now I show up to set and I'm not a PA anymore, and those are my friends. And when new PAs show up, I'm nice to them. And that's really it. Like, networking doesn't have to be that difficult. If you like somebody or you like their vibe or they said something that you were down with, or you go to a festival and you like your film, just go up and say hello. Like, you don't need anything from them specifically. Like, if you just like what they're giving off.
Yeah, sage advice. Just be good, like Google. Or at least like they were. So you have any horror stories for like a collaboration that didn't go so well? Anybody can chime in.
I co-wrote a piece, and then we made the thing, and I found out later that the co-writer went to the producer with complaints on the direction, because I also directed it, rather than like talking to me at any point during the process. And that was, I didn't like that, because like we're talking about, the collaboration, it's between the artists. And so for me, that felt very, I don't want to ascribe motive, but it just felt bad. It was like, we can talk about the thing. If there was like a thing, you have an idea, you want to change, like let's do it. Like, don't go to the boss to try to get what you want. That's also, I think, a disservice to the art, because it's not about us anymore. You're trying to do something that's not about us. So that was unfortunate, but that's what we do.
It's the best way to learn. Yeah.
I had someone steal a crowdfunding pitch from me one time, and that really pissed me off. We had collaborated on a couple shorts together. She was not a writer, so this is why I don't think she realized how messed up that was. She thought she was just taking like a line or two from a pitch. It was like 90% of a pitch that I had written, not specific to a project, just like pitching in general, like how marketing is. And we were like, oh, young filmmakers, women, da 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 da. I was like 19 years old, and I was like, man, I just wrote my first piece of like marketing copy. This shit's fire. And then we had a break because I was in school at the time, and I see this launch for a crowdfunding campaign, and I click on it, and it's my pitch for a different film. And then she also used a clip from my movie to pitch her film. So not writing specific, but I think part of it is rooted in her not being a writer, because I don't think she really associates. She's like, oh, well, it's not creative words. It's a pitch for a crowdfunding campaign. But that's also writing. Yes. And it also took a lot of thought and effort. And needless to say, that was the last time I collaborated with that person. But I don't typically collaborate on scripts. I've done it once or twice, and those have all been decent. I prefer not to do it, though, and I feel like most people prefer to write by themselves.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that. That's, oof. Wow. Yeah, fortunately, I haven't had anybody steal a story, but I have actually was on a film set. It was one of the first professional film sets that I was on that was literally almost ruined because of the DP. he was extremely skilled. He was from New York and everything, paid big bucks to have him out, but he was pretty much a tyrant the entire time, and he was belittling every single person. The person who actually owned the location was about to kick us all out, and I was the first AD, so I had to like mediate between that. So it's rough, but lesson learned: always vet the people that are working on your film set. It doesn't matter, even if they're as good as Steven Spielberg. If they are a POS, then they could definitely ruin tons and tons of money. Okay, so real quick. So with the way the industry is kind of operating today, especially with the belt tightening, a lot of us feel like we have to make our own movie and go down that beaten path. So what are some of the creative ways you all have seen screenwriters and producers get a script made without the traditional Hollywood studio system? This is up for grabs. I'm tired of saying your names.
I'll say I can't speak to with a super educated statement about what other folks are doing, but I will say for myself, for the feature that I'm working on now, the plan has always been that we would do it as an indie, and that would be so that I've had people say to me like, oh, well, you'll figure out how to pitch this to different studios, and I did work in LA for several years, so that's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And I knew from the very beginning, like, this is a story that is not incredibly commercial. This is a story that I want to tell the way I want to tell it for the audience that I want to share it with. And I think granted, that's not necessarily the best move in terms of like, okay, if I wanted to, really get into television directing, et cetera, that's not necessarily the straight path. But I have always wanted to make this story. I want to make kind of an independent film. And I think I was just here for I was listening to the DMV filmmakers panel just before this. And it is very possible and good and right and raw to get your resources together and make your own piece. And there's something I find really valid and beautiful about it. It doesn't necessarily have all the validation of going through the studio system, but I would say that there's something almost more beautiful about the way those kind of movies get made and the community that you build through that. You get more connected to your art, and again, the medium does things beyond what we are told that it does.
Yeah, 100%, especially these days too. Just because I think that's what audiences are really looking for is authenticity. So if you're able to bring that to the table, and if you're able to tell a story about how that was made, I mean, that's marketing material right there. Julie, you want to add to it?
I mean, that's pretty much exactly why I made my first feature. We didn't really have huge motivations behind it, or we didn't really know what we were going to do with it. We were seniors in college. I was 22 at the time, and it was just me and my friends, and we said, you know what, we want to make a feature. I had made like 10 short films at that point, and I was like, I think it's time to just make something bigger. And I don't have the resources per se, but I have all of my lovely friends that I've just spent years of COVID with, and we had bonded, which, what a weird time to bond with people in film school. I think that had a lot to do with it as well. We were a little more tightly bonded than you normally would be in a program like that, I think, just because of the weird circumstances surrounding it. And I had a script, I had directed things, and so all my friends just kind of backed me up, and it was like the sweetest thing in my life, where all these people are like, yeah, we'll do it. If you want to do it, we'll do it. And so we did, and there was a lot of not knowing what the hell we were doing, and my actors were of a range of talent and experience, but it was the most fun I've ever had. And it's not a bad film, too. When we were done, I had low expectations for this film, and then it got finished, and it did very decent in the film festival circuit. And we were like, all right, so we did the thing, and it was cool. Can't do it like that again. That was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of deal, but now I know I can make a feature, and that was kind of the big point for me. It was like, can I make a feature? Yes, I can. Are we going to do it a little bit more traditionally the second time around? Probably, but like we got that first one out of the way, and we all feel pretty good about it 3 years later. So
it's the best way to do it, just dive right into the deep end and just get it done. Chris?
I don't have a ton to add. I mean, there's so many ways to get a film made, from studios to making it with, your iPhone in your backyard. Like, there's a million ways to do it. So I think, what I see around me is folks who are doing the legwork required to get their projects off the ground, and that's just indie filmmaking. That's just what you have to do. And there's all kinds of strategies that you can employ to get your picture made. And it depends on what it is. What kind of movie are you making? Who do you want to be in it? Is there a producer you want to work with? Do you have relationships? Are you going to cold call people? Like, there are so many ways to get these things made. And I think audiences, they people don't have a real understanding that, like, most really good films that don't come out of studios are like startups. Like, it's a bunch of crazy people who one really extra crazy person pulls together, and then, the movie is made. Like, and the business behind all of it is totally different too. Who owns what? Where's the money going? Where's it coming from? And so it's totally wild that these things even come together in the first place. But the bottom line in all of it is just like, you got to find the people who are willing to be that insane to get the thing off the ground. Yeah. And that's really it.
It's the best way to success, I suppose. So that actually segues into one of the final questions here. Success is in the eye of the beholder. So what does it mean for each of you in terms of success, and what are your plans for the near-term and long-term future? Lindsey, you want to start? Or do you want to think for a second?
It's okay. Gosh. I mean, I'm pretty freaking happy right now. Like, I know I could be doing bigger things, and I always am striving to do bigger things, but I think a big part of being successful in this industry where there's a lot of rejection is being happy with doing what you're doing in the moment. And if you're not, it's going to be a long, sad road. And I love the people that I work with. So me being able to get up and go to work and be surrounded by people that I think are awesome and get to do stuff that doesn't feel like a real job sometimes is, successful. And if I get to continue to do that and it doesn't get any bigger than it is now, I'll be content with that. But I would like to do more. We all want to do more. But I don't know. I wake up pretty content most mornings, which, that's important. So, yeah.
It's definitely not a bad thing. Julie.
I think a friend of mine has a phrase, which is, I just want to make movies with my friends. And I love that. I think to me, success is really about telling a story that feels important and connecting to others through that story in whatever way. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love indie film specifically is it is within your power to do that and tell those stories, and to connect to people one-on-one through that. And to that end, I'm over the next 6 to 9 months, I'm pulling together the team and some of the resources to make my first feature, which I'm very excited about. So.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really exciting.
Congrats.
I mean, I have dreams, of course. I think immediately I would like to find a way out of corporate creative. It's pretty soul-crushing, but wherever you land, whatever pays your bills, those things tend to crush your souls in different ways. So I'm aware of all of that. But I think, similar to what's been said, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you do have to like what you do every day. And I think, so much of being a creative person can be very, very solitary, and it's this kind of cyclical experience of going away on your own and processing your ideas and your life and your emotions, and the whole while kind of really wanting to be connected to everybody around you. And then you're able to come out of that practice, get notes, get on set, like make your project. And for me, it's through that experience of being with myself and then coming out with something and connecting with other people. And I would like that constant cycle to be nourishing, to help me grow, to help me develop deep connections with other people. Because frankly, I think for me as an artist, I am driven to create art from just like a sense of always being a little bit too far away from other people than I would like to be, like really wanting to be connected to other people. And this is the way that my body and brain kind of salve that pain. And if the result is an Oscar before I'm 50, that's great. I love that for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really good. Honestly, that's probably the most important thing, because money comes and goes. You can get that anytime, right? I mean, yes, it might be hard, but time and the moments that you spend with some of the most fascinating people on film sets is honestly why I do it, and I don't even really get paid for it. Not really much at all, I mean, some commercial work and stuff like that, but otherwise for narrative stuff, like, nah. I mean, if a friend calls me up and, I'm free on a weekend, like, yeah, I mean, totally down to help. So I guess just to wrap this up, final question, advice. We hear it all the time. We hear it on podcasts. We hear it in blogs. We hear it on stages like this, right? So what is the one piece of advice that you never hear anybody talk about that you want to give to everybody right now?
I would say do the thing that is unique to you. There's a lot of advice. We've all read the advice. We've read the books. There is the right way to do things. The thing that is in your heart is something that someone else has not seen. And if that is true to you and that's real, then someone is going to connect with it. And as that connection creates other connections, and off you'll go. And I think it's really easy to feel like you have to fit into a specific box, and especially with filmmaking and screenwriting, it feels like there's very specific structures. And I think that if there's something unique or something a little weird in your heart that you want to say or that you want to do, the medium is more flexible than we think it is. So,
very well said. Lindsey?
I guess to bounce off of that a little bit, I would say maybe just care a little less. And even if it's fake caring a little less, because when I do it, it's fake caring. I care a lot. But if you can convince yourself that you don't care, your life will be a lot easier. I mean, I've pitched to people, like, when I'll get a random idea for script because I got a million bouncing around in my head at any given time. And before they're fully fleshed out, I will come up to a friend and just start, like, spitballing stuff at them. And they'll look at me like I'm insane. And, I go, you know what, I don't care. And then I write it down. I think about it a little bit more, and then it makes sense later. But if I cared too much about the way that person was looking at me in the moment, then I would have ditched it. So in little instances like that, like caring a little bit less about people that don't get it right away, because the stuff that's in your head's not going to make sense until you refine it. But it does. I have ADHD, so I speak when I want to speak, and sometimes it shouldn't have been said, but then you can say it again later. But you can't, if you're going to be like that, you can't care. That's pretty much it.
No, that's a very valid point. I mean, I probably cared way too much about my first few films, and by the third film, my brother and I think we had a few cocktails, and we came up with a weird, goofy idea, and we wrote it down, and we thought it was crazy, but we ended up making it. It was also the cheapest film we ever made, too, and it actually got us at least somewhere. So that was pretty cool. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think about writing in two ways. There's the technical craft, right? It's the building blocks, the Lincoln Logs that you have to put a story together. And those things can be emotionless, right? They can be just ways to get your character from A to B, right? And then there's like the meaning of the story, the emotion, like what does it mean? What are you trying to say about living? And I think my advice would be like, if you want to make good writing, you have to meet yourself in a very, very deep way. Because otherwise, the only thing that you'll be doing is playing with Lincoln Logs. And, you meet writers who are very competent and can get you from A to B, but there's something vacant behind it. And, artists are sensitive people to begin with, and it can be a very just challenging thing to, go to the dark places that are required in your own life that maybe are totally irrelevant to something that you're writing, that bring the truth to you that you can then use as a material in your storytelling. And so, that's a long-winded way of saying go to therapy. But you will discover things about yourself and your shadow and the shadows of those around you, but you can use that to help other people feel better about being a human being. And for me, that's what good writing is. Like, even if it's the darkest tale, like, ultimately the idea is that we all feel like a little bit more connected and a little bit more medicated in our soul after we see a really good film. So do the work in here and you'll be a better writer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Wow, that was really well said. Yeah, no, I mean, we could sit here and talk for hours, but unfortunately we got to wrap this up for the next show. But really appreciate you all being here to, share your wisdom and knowledge on screenwriting. It's a tough gig, all of this is, but that's the way you do it. You have to fail a whole bunch of times until you finally get it right. And hopefully after this talk tonight, next time we all fail, which we will, hopefully we'll fail just a little bit less. So thank you everyone for being here and hope you enjoy the rest of the festival.